In this video, I want to share a couple of real test taker tricks for the new TOEFL 2026 speaking section, which includes the listen and repeat task and the interview task. These are not official rules and they will not be right for everyone, but they work very well for people who have already taken the test and emailed me afterwards. So they might be useful for you to test in your own practice if you have enough time before your test. This is not something to add the night before. Your brain really needs several days of repetition to react automatically under test conditions. I'm Lee Yi, a TOEFL coach and a non-native speaker of English. I took the new test on January 21st, and I've studied all the paid mock tests very deeply, and I've been collecting feedback from real test takers since the format changed. Let me show you two tricks that stood out and how I would use them safely. First, listen and repeat, especially the longer sentences with many chunks. On the real test, some sentences have 5 to 6 small parts linked with when, because, although, which, and, things like that. The sentences are completely understandable when you listen to them, but it's hard to repeat them 2 to 3 seconds later, simply because of memory load. One student, Matías, wrote to me after his test and described a technique that helped him a lot with these longer sentences. So here's what he did in practice and then on test day. For long listen and repeat sentences, he quickly wrote down the first letter of each word grouped by clauses and then used that as a visual anchor while repeating the full sentence. Let me show you an illustrative example. This is not a real TOEFL sentence, but it gives you the idea. Before you leave the cinema through the exit, remember to check your seat for forgotten items and recycle popcorn baskets and plastic bottles in their designated bins. So he might write something like this in small groups. He's not writing full words. He's only writing letters quickly to give his brain a line to follow. For him, this solved 2 problems. Writing full sentences took too much time. Full notes created interference, so he started losing small but important words like the, to. With first letter anchors, he saved time, lowered interference, and still had a visual guide. He told me this worked very well on his real test when he used it for longer sentences. So one warning about this trick. This technique is not something to try for the first time the day before your exam. To become safe, it needs at least 3 to 4 days of practice so your hand and brain can work together automatically. Also, for many people, any kind of note-taking during listen and repeat actually makes performance worse because attention splits between writing and listening. So if you're still struggling with the basic repeat, start there first. Only test the first letter trick later in practice and keep it only if it clearly helps you. Do not add new note-taking methods the last day. Okay? And this is what I recommend as a baseline practice. I recommend shadowing the sentence that you hear. This is the same kind of practice that translators and interpreters use. Shadowing means you hear the sentence and you repeat it right away with no pausing to think and no translating into your language. For practice, play one sentence, repeat it right away, don't pause it to think, and don't translate it. Again, don't translate into your language. If you do 10 to 15 minutes of this kind of practice every day for a few days, your brain gets used to listening and speaking together. The interference in your head becomes smaller and long sentences start to feel less shocking. Okay? And then if you're comfortable with that, you can experiment with the first letter anchor technique on some long sentences and see how it helps you. And sometimes you won't understand a word in the sentence for other reason than the cognitive load. Okay. There are 2 main reasons. There might be some vocabularies that you don't know yet, or there are some sentence patterns or intonation patterns that go with this sentence patterns that you're not used to. If it's just vocabulary, try not to get too fixated on one word. when you listen to it during practice or during the test. Keep the overall structure and rhythm and do your best to fill in the gap. TOEFL speaking scores are in bands from 0 to 5. You can still get, say, 3 if you miss a few words or don't fully understand one vocabulary item, as long as you produce a few full sentence and the general structure is correct. Now, for the interview question, another test taker, Matías, wrote after his exam that the AI video of the person talking during the interview was very distracting for him. He found it uncomfortable to look at the avatar while answering. If you're taking the new TOEFL 2026 and want extra practice, timing, and scoring guides and updates as we collect more real results, there's a link below this video. Fill out the short form and I'll send them to you. So his solution was to basically ignore the AI face and treat the interview as an audio-only task and focus on his answer structures instead. This is, of course, allowed. You're not required to look at the face. If that face makes you more nervous, you can look slightly away or even close your eyes. For some people, this small adjustment reduces anxiety a lot. So, additional reminder, many people overthink the interview task when they look at some more abstract questions or questions about future trends. They tend to talk about hypothetical examples, build a very complex logic. There's nothing really wrong with that. It's more about the execution. Can you execute it continuously without stopping in 45 seconds? Or will it slow you down too much, cause you to pause all the time, or cause you to make more grammatical mistakes? Okay, so you have to think about execution. Okay. What matters more, especially in the new TOEFL speaking interview questions, just speak continuously, and as long as your previous sentence connects to the next sentence somehow, usually you're going to do better than you think. This is not the old TOEFL speaking task one. You can, according to my test results, you really can't be sort of quote unquote less logical. So semi-realistic examples can be used all the time. A lot of times I just made up examples on the spot. For example, do you think people will use AI to prepare for tests in the future? I will say something like, of course, because AI helps you learn very efficiently. For example, a couple of days ago, I was preparing for the TOEFL test. I was initially kind of worried, but then I started to use ChatGPT and I started discussing with ChatGPT and talked to ChatGPT and asked ChatGPT questions. See, I just keep going and keep going and going. Okay. So a safe structure, if you want to, there's a video for that in my channel about how to use a simple statement and a simple reason and a semi-real or completely fake example like I just did. Okay, these are okay to use. So just speak nonstop, then you will usually do better than you think. These tips are mainly for people who already know the basic format of listen, repeat, and interview, and for people who have at least several days before the test and wanted to experiment with small changes to feel more in control. If you just started, you are still learning what each task look like, then your first priority, for example, for listen and repeat, will be just basic shadowing the sound and start to build simple answers based on any kind of answer structure that you have. Okay. You can always add these tricks later and test them, experiment with them. So thanks again for Matthias for the first letter listen and repeat idea, and to Matías for sharing his experience with the AI phase in the interview. If you have already taken the new TOEFL test and you've discovered small tricks that helped you on test day, you're more than welcome to email me about it and we will share with everyone else.